not with us, they can watch it later. So, yeah, I just had a few items wanted to make everybody aware of. The first one was that, particularly for auditors, but for everybody just to be aware, as I've been out doing my audit, the energy audit monitoring, I've been looking to see if auditors are documenting their combustion air calculations. And some auditors do and some auditors don't. That's something I'd like to see more of in the future. One agency pointed me to something that I think Wade pointed this out when he does his RMGA, but I just made the resource, I just put it on our website. So basically there's a form that could be helpful if you want to use it to help you size your combustion air openings. I titled it Form A10 and put it on our website. So on the Utah WAP Resources tab, down in the audit section, so I've been putting all the audit resources under attachment 7 for the NEAT audit. And then if they are one of those required forms or at least required sections, then I've just numbered it appropriately. So in the audit file, section A10 is your combustion analysis. So that's where all your tapes from your combustion appliances should go. As of right now, this is not a requirement, but it is a best practice. But if you'll just click that link, then this should look familiar to many of you. It's from the National Fire Protection Association, but this is one form. If you guys have a better method for doing it or a different form, you're welcome to use whatever. But this would be a very good way to document that you actually calculated your combustion air needs for whatever home you're working on. So just wanted to point that out, that it's, there's a link on the website. Any questions on that before I move on to the next one? All right. I have a couple people have asked if we could kind of give you guys the heads up when we see training opportunities. So we've begun doing that in the last maybe month and a half. Hopefully the emails that you get from me are not too obnoxious. I try not to make them too frequent, but when I do see a good training opportunity, I'll send it your way. I apologize. There's been, at least the one I sent out last week was very short notice, but that was as much notice as I got on it. But I would encourage you guys, especially you guys who need your continuing education credits, either if you're the qualifier for your agency's contractor license, or if you need them for your BPI stuff, try and stay on top of that, because nobody else will do that for you. Anyway, one of the recent trainings that I sent out to everybody, I actually attended it. It was nice because just by logging in, I got an hour and a half of BPI credit for watching the training. But it was a really good training. So if you did not attend it, if you have questions about it, I just wanted to point it out that it's available on YouTube. So it was the Energy Conservatory put it on. They're the ones that manufacture all of these red blower doors and the DG700 and stuff. And the training was on diagnosing CAS test failures. So for anybody who's interested, if you go to YouTube and you search for the Energy Conservatory, they have their own channel. And if you click on videos, then you can see all of their videos. Obviously, they'd love to sell you some new equipment, but they also, they've got a couple of videos on here that are really valuable. This was the one that they just did, the diagnosing CAS test failures, and there was just a lot of geek information in there. So if you love a lot of that technical stuff, if you love getting into the details, then I'd encourage you to sit down and watch it sometime. And then if you need BPI credit, I would venture a guess that if you were to document to BPI that you sat down and watched it, maybe have your manager sign that, that they would probably give you credit for that. Obviously, you would have to take the initiative to send that to BPI. Anyway, so that was that. The next item is that the quarterly technical training survey. So a couple of months ago, in an effort just to get some feedback from everybody about this meeting, I sent out a survey, and I had about, I think I had like 8 or 9, maybe 10 people respond to it, which was really, really good. I appreciate everybody who responded. What I learned from that survey, though, was that I was asking questions about trainings that happened like 9, 10 months prior, and that was probably hard for everybody to remember what we actually talked about. So I'm going to be sending out a survey on a quarterly basis, and it should be very short and sweet. I'm just asking you guys to give some feedback on the trainings that would have happened in the last 3 months. So probably today after this meeting, I will send out that first survey. And I would encourage every one of you to just take a minute and give us some feedback. It is completely anonymous as long as you don't write down your name on the form. We have no idea who it comes from, so give us your honest feedback because we'd love to make any improvements we can. Anyway, so watch for that and please take it if you would. The next item was just a reminder. There's an OSHA 10 class next week. I'm assuming that, Wade, you've got a list of attendees for that.
Yep, I do.
All right, so just remember if you've signed up for that to, come up to the training center next Monday, Tuesday. And then the coordinators meeting is next Wednesday for the coordinators, just a reminder. I think Brad sent out some stuff this morning. If any of you are wanting to join us, it's going to be at the Salt Lake office, just on the main floor there. And then the public hearing will follow the brief coordinator meeting. So, and then, I had these last 2 questions. Let me ask the last one first. Is anybody who's on the line going to go to the National Performance Conference in Nashville in a couple of weeks? There going to be anybody out there to play with? Gary, did you ever sign up? Maybe he can't hear me. Maybe he's got his feet up on the desk and he's falling asleep. Jesse says no. Gary says yes. All right. Anyway, Dalton and I will be out there. If anybody is going and you want to meet up or get together for dinner or anything, let us know. I'm sure we'll run into each other, but that one is probably going to be a good one. Obviously, it's extremely expensive, and it's up to coordinators as to whether or not anybody attends, but just wanted to get a feel for that. And then the last question I wanted to ask was just, has anybody attended any good trainings lately? Has anybody out there watched anything or seen anything that would be valuable to this group that you guys want to share? Besides these riveting monthly meetings. Anybody got anything? All right, nothing. Well, keep that in mind as you guys are out there attending stuff. If you guys can be the eyes and ears for the whole program, if you ever come across a good training or a good instructor, let us know. If it's something we can share with the group, we would love to. So. All right, does anybody else have any other business or any other questions that they wanted to ask before we just get into our main topic here? All right, I'm also hearing silence, so we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Wade. Let me, I guess I need to click on a button.
Can you turn the screen over to me, Matt?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can figure out how to do this.
There you go.
Can everyone see my screen that has the attachment 22 HVAC Best Practices on it?
I can see it, Wade.
I can see
Okay.
it. Yep.
So what we thought we would like to do, because it's come up several times,
Yo.
why we've been out auditing and from a couple of different agencies recently is they've brought up the best practices and, hey, this says this, but you say that. There's some things in there that I have said that directly contradict what are in the best practices, and there's probably some stuff in here that doesn't need to be here anymore because it's in other places. It's possible that when we get done with this exercise, we might decide that this document can go away altogether. I don't know. Some of you might want to keep it around because it's a document. If you're using contractors, you can hand it to your contractor and say, here's what you need to do to satisfy the requirements of our program. I'm certain there's things in it that need to be changed, so I thought we would just have a group discussion on this document. I'll give you some background on how this document came to be and some of the stories on why some of the stuff is actually in here. Some of them are kind of funny. And just go through it kind of line by line and discuss each of these items and get kind of a consensus from the group where we want to go with it. Quite honestly, guys, as I prepared for this and went through it yesterday and a little bit this morning, I kind of came to the conclusion that it's probably a document we could get rid of. But, you know, let's look at it all together and see how we feel about it. So how was this document initially created? So when I was hired 7.5 years ago by the program, apparently the program was kind of new to installing furnaces. So in the past, the weatherization program in Utah never really got into installs. They just did a lot of clean and tunes and that type of stuff. And so when I came on board, installing furnaces was kind of a new thing for the program, and of course it really ramped up during ARA. So Mike Johnson, the program director at the time, and Gary Spangenberg, his right-hand man, asked me to put together a HVAC best practices, kind of a down and dirty, here's what we expect from you if you're going to install furnaces. So that's how this document was originally created. 7.5 years old. I don't think we've ever really looked at it or updated it since that time. So it's probably time to look at it and go through it. Especially because, as I mentioned earlier, there's some stuff in here that directly contradicts what I've told agencies, and we'll talk about why that stuff's in there and the contradiction and stuff. So I just kind of want to start at line 1, and we'll go through it and discuss each thing and get your guys' input and opinion. So we're going to start here with line number 1. It says 90% plus units will be installed whenever possible. Document in the client file why a 90% was not used. If a 90% is not used, an 80% two-stage variable must be used. Let me start off by saying that I think that last statement is a little too prescriptive, and that could probably go away. And our field guide actually covers that. If you look at our field guide on page 238, it talks about, it says, if possible, install a condensing sealed combustion direct vent furnace or boiler with a 90% plus efficiency. And then it talks about if you can't put in a 90, just at least use an 80 or the next best choice. So can anyone give me an idea of why you wouldn't be able to put in a 90% efficient furnace, or why you wouldn't want to?
The furnace was in an attic.
What's the problem with it being in an attic?
Well, the condensation can freeze.
Aha. Okay, you could run into a situation where you can freeze those furnaces up. So that may be a compelling reason why you don't want to put a 90% furnace in a particular place, attic or crawl space. That actually came up recently. There are things you can do to prevent them from freezing. Sometimes those things that you can do are, you know, cost prohibitive or just take too much time or money. What we certainly don't want to see is someone installing heat tape on a condensate drain line, and especially heat tape that's wired to run 24/7, 365 days a year. That's kind of exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do for the client. So if you had a situation where you had a compelling argument that you couldn't put in a 90 because of freezing or some other things, I'm perfectly fine doing something else. And again, this line number 1 is addressed in our field guide. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be in the best practices, but that's why we're doing this, is to discuss it. Another situation that we ran into just recently is the client had this Williams freestanding room furnace that was 60% efficient, needed to be replaced. There was no way they were going to get ductwork in this house, so the best option was to go with like another Williams or Empire freestanding or room furnace. Well, they don't make those in 90%. They only come in 80%. So, you know, again, forcing you to go one way or the other just kind of seems counterproductive. So, any thoughts or input on that first line? So if we were to do this, just get rid of it because it's covered in the field guide? Yes, no, maybe? No one
Get
cares?
rid of it. Oh, get rid of
That's
it.
good.
All right. All right, number 2. In all instances when a furnace is being replaced, a manual J load calculation will be completed and a printout included in the client file. Our field guide actually covers that, again, on page 235. It says you'll use manual J or equivalent. I'm just fine with the need audit. I believe it's equivalent, and especially where Turner has been working with the auditors to ensure that every component of the house gets put in there. Because the thing you need to realize is the audit tool is also sizing your equipment, and if you miss components, if you miss a wall, if you miss windows, if you miss whatever, it starts to undersize your equipment because the tool is going, okay, the house is only so big and there's only so many exterior components. So if you're doing the audit right, I've compared the need audit to the manual J, and 95% of the time they're so close it's no big deal. So, you know, our field guide says manual J or equivalent. So I think that that's covered in the field guide and doesn't need to be in here. The next part of that says it is recommended that the BDR Comfort Optimizer handheld calculator be purchased and utilized for this purpose. 7.5 years ago, that was a great little inexpensive tool to do manual J. It doesn't exist anymore as far as I know. There is no support for it. So I think that just needs to go away. Again, the need audit does a good job as long as you're doing the audit correctly. And the size of the new furnace must closely match the calculation results. Basically, that's covered in our field guide, page 235 under equipment selection. It says you got to follow manual S, and plain and simple, manual S says furnaces shall not be sized more than 30% bigger than what your load calls for. So, for example, if your need audit or manual J says you need a 60,000, your furnace should not be 30% bigger than that, so you could go up to 78,000 and still meet the manual S. So again, I'm kind of the opinion that all of that's covered elsewhere and probably could just go away. Thoughts?
Wade, so will you repeat the page number or at least the chapter you're looking at in the field guide?
Oh, field guide, page 235,
Okay.
right in the middle of the page, equipment selection.
All right, and then I had a question that came up. I was talking with an auditor a couple of weeks ago, and they had an instance where they replaced a furnace under crisis, and they didn't size it properly. And so I was wondering how agencies are dealing with their crisis furnaces, because if it says in all instances when a furnace is being replaced, what are they doing to size those? You guys have good methods for that, or has this been an issue for anybody out there?
Yeah, good question. What do you do on crisis to correctly size your equipment?
We usually do manual J's before we actually install the furnace or the equipment in it.
Okay.
You guys use
Good.
like the actual, well, one of the manual J softwares for that?
Yes.
Awesome. So if you know you're going to weatherize the house, do you kind of do your manual J and use what you suspect you might put in? Like if you know you're going to do insulation in the attic, maybe you run your manual J assuming that insulation is eventually going to go in?
Yes, we do.
Okay. That's a good approach. Again, you know, manual J or equivalent, there's a lot of good equivalents out there. I use manual J myself, but I understand the software is very expensive, but there are other stuff. And again, the need audit, I suspect you could use the need audit to kind of help generate a load calc for a crisis if you absolutely had to.
What about modulating furnaces?
Modulating and multi-stage furnaces are great because they really protect you from oversizing. So as much as I hate to admit this, you could install 100,000 BTU modulating in just about every home you go in and be safe, but don't do that, okay? Size them correctly. Modulating and multi-stage are awesome because if you are a little bit oversized, that thing will run at the lower stage. It runs where it needs to. But that doesn't give you carte blanche to just start throwing hundreds and 120s in every home you do, okay?
Well, yeah,
Anyway, any other
I think if it's all
any other
covered in
comments
the
on-
field guide,
I'm sorry, what was that?
I think if it's all listed in the field guide, then I'm comfortable with it.
All right, well, then I'm going to go ahead and let's just make that go away. It's all covered in the field guide. Okay, line number 3. On 90-plus installations, intake air must be taken from outside of the home, no exceptions. So when I first hired on, we ran into a lot of instances where agencies were installing 90% furnaces and only running the exhaust to the outside and pulling the intake air from inside the home. You can do that. The manufacturer says you can, but why the heck would you? It's just not a good idea. And now that appliance, if you do it that way, is no longer a direct vent appliance, so it doesn't fall under the venting rules and the rules for a direct vent appliance. It now becomes a mechanically vented or mechanically drafted appliance, and it falls under a different set of rules. Plus, you're defeating the whole safety purpose of that furnace. The reason we run the intake to the outside is to absolutely prevent that thing from backdrafting. If you only run the exhaust to the outside and leave the intake open to the house, yes, you can backdraft that piece of equipment. Since about, I don't know, a year after I came on board, that problem has gone away. I haven't seen anyone ever install a direct vent furnace as a not direct vent piece of equipment. So I'm just kind of, again, of the opinion that that could go away. And again, it's covered in our field guide under page 238. It says best practice is to install sealed combustion direct vent. Direct vent means both pipes go to the outside. Has anyone got any problems with us just getting rid of that? And is there anyone who is not installing them as direct vent for some strange reason? I'm taking that as everyone's cool with that just going away.
Hey, Wade.
Yeah.
Hey, so we run into a lot of contractors that don't vent them out. Is this something that we should touch? Because if we touch it, we own it, especially if the furnace is fairly new.
You can address any venting issues as a health and safety measure. So
Yeah,
if there's a venting issue on a water heater, that's when we want to touch the water heater. So I think it's something to watch
But it's
for.
not a venting issue, because technically it's fine to do it that way. I'm talking about if we do it, then we own it.
Yeah, I guess if you see it and you don't touch it, you need to do a worst case draft test on that appliance and show that it's drafting and not back drafting.
Absolutely correct. If you come across a 90...
on it, though. I mean, it's still induced, so why would it backdraft? It's not like a water heater.
Yeah, just
Because your
it's
intake-
CYA.
Your intake is now open to the house, and it's now that burner box is not a sealed box. It's subject to pressures in the house. And yes, it can backdraft if you apply enough negative gas pressure to it. So Matt's absolutely right. If you run across a 90% furnace that's not direct vented, which means that only the exhaust is going out to the outside and the intake is open to the house, it is now not a direct vent appliance. It falls under a mechanically drafted appliance, and yes, it can be backdrafted if you have a negative enough CAS. And again, my contention is this: why would you ever do that? You defeat the whole safety purpose behind a direct vent sealed combustion appliance.
If your contractor's not doing it, there's nothing wrong with running an intake vent to the outside anyway.
Yeah, and you could address that as health and safety if you ran across it, and that's what I would do. Again, if you run across it and you're not going to take care of it, then you need to do a CAS test on that appliance.
What I'm just getting at is if we touch it, we own it, correct?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah. And that,
whether
like,
it's a health safety or not, it doesn't matter. We touch it, we own it.
yeah.
The other thing is now
Why
you've
does
got
that
to do
bother you?
combustion air calculation. So because that furnace is pulling all of its combustion air from inside the home, do you have enough combustion air? So you got two things you got to consider there.
Well, we always figure that out. That's
So-
part of the audit.
Can I throw in my own personal example? So
Absolutely.
I built a new house, and I ran the blower door on it, and I have 1.3 air changes per hour, so it's kind of tight. And as I was shopping for my water heater, I wanted a direct vent water heater, and for some reason I couldn't find one, and I've learned a little bit in the process. I've learned that they are available, but I ended up buying a water heater that it has the draft inducer on the top, but it takes its combustion air from inside my house. And that thing has a pressure limit switch on it that trips all the time not because I don't have enough combustion air, because I have it in an unfinished basement and there's ample combustion air, but my house is too tight. And so I had some issues, and I've worked most of them out, but when my ASHRAE fans are on, I can backdraft that water heater.
Absolutely. So again, that's where that came from, because when I came on, 7.5 years ago, we were seeing a lot of agencies installing 90% furnaces with just the exhaust run to the outside. And of course, Gary and Mike said, that's not how we're going to operate. This is going to be a best practice. You will always pull the air from the outside. And again, in my opinion, why would you do otherwise? There's just no reason not to direct vent a direct vent appliance. All right, let's go on to number 4. Electrical systems on new furnaces will be grounded and polarity cannot be reversed. In situations where there's no ground system in the home, contact me for remedies. I don't know that needs to be in there anymore. All the manufacturers, if you're following the manufacturer's instructions, you properly ground the equipment. That's because of flame sensing or flame rectification. The equipment's got to have a good ground. I haven't seen any problems with this for years in our program. When I first came on, there was a handful of instances where they installed a new furnace, it wouldn't work right. We went out there, discovered that there was no ground or improperly grounded. It wasn't making flame rectification. Again, Gary and Mike said, let's put this in as a best practice so it doesn't happen again. I haven't seen this as a problem for years, guys. So again, your input, is this a problem you're running into on a regular basis? Or if you're following the manufacturer's instructions, it shouldn't be a big deal. And most furnaces anymore won't run if you reverse the polarity. So if it won't run, you got to fix it anyway.
Hey Wade, as we're going through this, if there's any of this stuff that is not in the field guide but would be still valuable, maybe if you could mark it slightly differently, then we could at least add it to our list of things that we may add to the field guide when we do our audit of that.
Absolutely, and that's
I
the
don't know
other
if
thing,
this one
guys,
would meet that or not, but
yeah, that's the other thing, guys. I know some of you use this document to give to your contractors. So maybe some of you don't want this document to go away, but you just want changes. I need to know that. I just need to know what you guys want. Again, I'm of the opinion that most everything in this document is covered elsewhere. So it's my favorite term, redundant and unnecessary. Kind of up to you guys where you want to go with this. So
Hey,
I'm gonna go ahead and,
wait. This is Doug.
Uh-huh.
We'd like to continue to use it to give to our contractors, so if we could do some update and make it more relevant to what we're actually doing, that would be very nice of the state to do that for us.
and I'm happy to do that for you.
And also, what would be very nice for you to do also is to send me an email with the reference of all those page numbers that's in the field guide, so I can mark those if you would please, and I'll send you a dozen donuts.
I'll tell you what I'll do. Instead of donuts, send me an apple or a banana because I'm trying to eat right. But
Okay.
because somebody wants to actually continue using this document rather than kill it off, I'll go through and make changes to it, and I'll actually reference our field guide in it. So again, my goal will be to make this a quick and easy document you can hand to your contractor and say, look, here, if you're going to do work for our program, here's what you need to do to meet the minimum requirements. Oh, and here's the references to the field guide also. Would that work for you?
That would be, yeah, that would be sweet. I'll send you 2 ribeyes and filet.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Now you're talking Wade's language right there.
Right.
Hey, that is one thing to keep in mind. Even if you guys do have some of these summary job scope documents, make sure that your contractors know that the field guide is part of the contract because the federal regs say that it has to be. So I think it'll be very wise if you can reference the field guide here, and that'll just kind of reinforce the fact that there is a field guide and it does have information that pertains to what they're doing. So
Good point.
So the field guide or the state guide? Because they conflict in some spots.
yeah, they conflict in many spots.
We're
the answer
aware
is
of the conflicts,
both.
and we're working to resolve them. And when in doubt, just call us. All right, let's move along so we can try to stay on schedule here. I don't want to keep you guys too late. So number 5, this has been one of heated debate for many years. Cellular Core PVC is not allowed for venting or combustion air. So how many of you have read your furnace installation manuals and know what it says in there about venting with PVC?
I haven't.
All right, well, let me bring you up to speed. So practically every furnace manufacturer that I am aware of to date, including, to my dismay, American Standards, says right in their literature that cellular core PVC is allowed for venting. So what I went ahead and did, I'm going to move something over onto my other screen. Can everyone see this big warning notice thing I got on my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so this warning notice is from a company called Charlotte Pipe. And if you go out into any of your warehouses and look at your PVC pipe, I'm willing to bet you lunch it comes from Charlotte Pipe Manufacturing. Okay, they're the #1 largest supplier of PVC, ABS, and CPVC pipe in the U.S. So this is Charlotte Pipe and Foundry's cautions and warnings for their products, okay? And I just want to point these out. So orange is a warning, indicates a hazardous situation which, if not avoided, could result in severe injury or death. Caution indicates a hazardous situation which, if not avoided, could result in minor or moderate injury. And a notice is just that, notice could result in system failure or property damage. And in this, they address 4 of their pipes. So the one in question is PVC or cellular core PVC, which is this top one, PVC and ABS, DWV systems. DWV is drain waste vent or the cellular core PVC. And just so you guys know real quick, the difference between cellular core and solid core is the cellular core PVC has a foam core inside of it. So if you cut into the pipe, you'll see the foam core. It's really lightweight pipe, and so that's what they mean by DWV, the Drain Waste Vent Cellular Core. And according to the manufacturer of that product, you should read the following warnings and cautions. The one we want to look at is W10, so we'll scroll down to W10. And they specifically talk about combustion gas venting. So here's the funny part. The first bullet point says, always install, use pipe or fittings as specified by the appliance manufacturer's installation instructions to invent appliances. So if I look at Coleman or York, or even, again, to my dismay, American Standard has got on board, it says right in their instructions you can use cellular core. But Charlotte Manufacturing says in the next bullet point, never use PVC cellular core or ABS cellular core pipe for combustion gas venting. So the manufacturer of the stuff says don't do it. So here's where the great big heated debate comes in. My furnace manufacturer says I can, but the pipe manufacturer says I can't. And they've got it under their warning. Serious injury or death could occur. So what do I do?
You go with what the manufacturer of the pipe says.
That's where I go with it, okay?
Because they're the ones that know their product.
Exactly. They know their own product. Just because the furnace manufacturer says you can use it, does that mean the manufacturer of the furnace knows that product? They know their furnace, but they don't know the cellular core PVC. The other thing I fall back on is I have seen cellular core fail. It doesn't hold up well, especially if it's exposed to a lot of heating and cooling cycles. It breaks down. The foam core in it doesn't hold up well to acidic conditions, and guess what? The condensate water in flue gases is highly acidic. So
Especially
it
if you
breaks
drill the
down.
test hole in it.
So even though the furnace manufacturer says you can do it, and we all kind of default to what the manufacturer says, the manufacturer of the product says don't do it. And at the end of the day, the cost difference between cellular core and solid core is like pennies. So I'm still of the opinion, don't use cellular core to vent your appliances. It's just not a durable product that will hold up over time. Anyone want to weigh in?
I got, I guess, a question and maybe something to think about. Like, what's a good way to identify when it is not? Because I just wanted to, I guess, verify that the cost difference is really not that much. Or do we have contractors who may be bidding on some of this stuff and they're going to go to the supply house and want to get the cheap stuff instead of the solid core stuff?
And here's the other problem. So if I call Johnstone's and say, send me 20 feet of 3-inch PVC pipe, guess what they'll send me by default? Cellular core. I have to specifically ask for Schedule 40 solid core PVC pressure pipe.
Is it just the Schedule 40? Like, what is it that we're looking for when we do this?
Just solid core. Cellular core is marked. It says right on it, foam core or cellular core pipe. And it's also marked drain waste vent. Regular solid core, Schedule 40 says Schedule 40 pressure pipe on it. And it's easy to tell the difference.
Okay, so if it is a Schedule 40, it's going to be a solid core.
Well, not necessarily. Schedule 40 doesn't mean solid core.
Okay.
Cellular core can be Schedule 40 too, but it's that additional marking of cellular core or pressure pipe. If it says pressure pipe, it's solid core. Again, it's anyone who's looked at it can tell the difference.
Okay, yeah, I can look at the end of it, but I kind of had my own little learning curve as I was doing my own thing on, at my house, and it took me a little while to figure out where to get it and what it was called and stuff like that. So
If you have a doubt, just take a hammer and hit a 6-inch piece of it. Cellular core will shatter.
see if it shatters.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you.
You can also tell by weight. Pick up a 20-foot length of cellular core and a 20-foot length of solid core. You'll know the difference right away.
Perfect.
So I'm still of the opinion that we leave that in there. Anyone strongly disagree? Okay, moving on. PVC is combustible. You guys all know that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Temperature limit of PVC is 140 degrees. So the reason this is in there is because, again, early on when we were going out on some jobs, I was out with Gary, and we went to several jobs, and they had run PVC flues up a 6-inch flue, and then right next to it they ran a liner for the water heater. And so that liner for the water heater is running 20 feet up that 6-inch flue with PVC pipe in it, and they're all touching each other. Okay, we know how hot those liners get. Flue gases from the water heaters between 300 and 500 degrees. That PVC will melt, it will fail. Seen it happen firsthand.
We had that last week with single wall.
Yep. So again, I don't know that this needs to be said. It's just part of understanding your furnace training and RMGA. Clearance from combustibles. PVC is a combustible. So I think it's a redundant statement. I'm pretty sure it's covered in our field guide too. Follow manufacturer's venting instructions along with the National Fuel Gas Code. Okay. All right, number 7, concentric or Bvent type termination kits are recommended whenever possible. Gal, I haven't seen any termination problems for years out there, guys. So you guys are using Mayvents, Bvents, Concentrics, or they're doing 2-pipe terminations that look good. I know early on I saw some crazy terminations that you just look at them and go, what the hell? But that hasn't been a problem forever. So any input on that? All right. We all know number 8, Masticore Tape is not allowed on venting systems. Early on we saw...
Hey, Wade.
Yeah.
Sorry. Had to go get some coffee. Could you, when you're redoing the best practice sheet that we're going to hand to contractors, could you reference that warning on that cellular pipe from Charlotte Pipe?
Absolutely.
So that when they bitch and moan and say, oh, well, you know, the manufacturer says this, I can say, well, okay, but this says this, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Wade.
Yeah. Someone else have a question?
Chicken? You
What's
like
that?
chicken?
I do.
You like chicken? Because I'm going to send you a couple chicken breasts, too.
Nice. All right, so number 8, no one has a problem with that. Let's see. Number 9, this is the big one here. This has come up a couple of times lately. So, drilling Bvent for testing is not allowed. I disagree with that 100%, and I still stand behind that comment. I don't have a problem with you guys drilling Bvent. If you understand how a Bvent system works, you realize that drilling a hole in it doesn't hurt it. Case in point, a water heater has a big giant hole in the venting system. It's called a draft hood. Okay? So why is this in the best practices? So years ago when I got hired on, Mike Johnson was in charge of the program. And at one of the agencies, I guess what happened was someone was out drilling Bvent. And there is a right way and a wrong way, guys, and we'll talk about that. But someone was running around drilling Bvent to do testing, which again I don't necessarily have a problem with if you do it right. We'll talk about the right way. But they were crushing inner liners doing it. And Questar Gas has a problem with that. And Questar Gas gives us a lot of money. And Questar Gas makes it really easy for us to get their rebates. And so Questar Gas told Mike Johnson, we got a problem with your program drilling holes in flues. So Mike Johnson said, don't worry. We'll make this a best practice. And this was one of the few times that Mike Johnson got very crass with me. I sat in his office and explained to him the science behind venting and why drilling a hole in it isn't a problem. And he turned to me and said, Wade, don't explain the science to me. Just put this in the goddamn best practices. Period. End of story. That's why it's in there. So in talking to Brad about it, Brad agrees, and I have to agree with Brad. Questar does have a problem with drilling Bvent. I've never been able to get a good explanation from them. The only explanation they've ever given me is if you make a hole in Bvent, it will leak flue gases. Well, if it's leaking through that hole, then that means that the flue is backdrafting and you've got a bigger problem. But because Questar gives us a lot of money and they make it easy for us to get their rebates, Brad's of the opinion, and I don't disagree, that if we have anything in writing, it probably ought to make them happy. That being said, I have letters from 4 of the major Bvent manufacturers that say they're fine with drilling their product as long as you follow some common sense items. So common sense item number 1, if you're going to drill Bvent, drill at the joint. Okay? If you go out to the middle of a Bvent pipe, there's a big air gap between the inner and outer liner. And if you drill the hole there, because that outer liner is such thin material, when you pop through it, it has a tendency to pull your drill bit in really fast. And when that happens, it'll actually crush that inner liner or compress it down. Okay? So if you drill at the joint, the connection where 2 pipes join or an elbow or a pipe joins, that inner liner is right against the outer liner just by the way they manufacture it. And you can't hardly screw up the inner liner if you drill at that point. Okay? So that's a best practice from the Bvent manufacturers. Another best practice is make the hole as small as you possibly can. So for draft testing, what I recommend and what I do is, you've all been in the training house and you've seen that little piece of copper pipe we use for our draft testing. That's called refrigerant capillary tube, and you can buy it at any HVAC or refrigeration supply store. And it's just barely 1/8 of an inch in diameter. And if you'll take a 1/8 of an inch self-tapping or a 1/4 inch self-tapping screw and drill that right through the joint, it actually leaves a hole that's just perfectly sized for that little copper capillary tube to go in to do your draft testing. Then when you're done, you can just put that screw back in and no one's the wiser that you drilled a hole. Same thing for combustion testing. If you have to drill the flue, you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's or anywhere else, get a little 3/8 inch self-drilling screw, drill that in through the joint, do your testing, and then when you're done, put the screw back in it. So we will probably still have something in our official written documents that says we don't recommend you drill Bvent, but I will never give you grief about it if you're doing it right and smart. Oh, and the other thing the manufacturer of the Bvent says, anyone drilling Bvent should be a trained technician. So if you don't have your RMGA certification, don't drill Bvent. I'm curious about your guys' input on that, because I've heard a lot of it lately.
Just clear direction is all I was concerned about, because I remembered reading it that said don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I ran across it, I says don't do it.
Okay.
So just a clear recommendation is all that's necessary.
Okay. You all know my stance now. I don't have a problem if you do it. Just be smart about it. Go to the joints. Use screws to plug your holes. Don't make the holes any bigger than you need to. Certainly don't drill holes in flues in front of customers. That's just asking for trouble, because they don't understand how those systems work.
Or any places Questar Gas will see it.
Yeah, you know, don't put it where Questar can see it. That's why you put a screw back in it. So again, for draft testing, use the smallest little capillary tubes you can find, and a 1/4 inch self-tapping screw makes a nice clean hole to test in. Put the screw back in, no one's the wiser. Same thing on a combustion testing, 3/8 inch self-drilling screw, go to the joint. And that's what the manufacturer of the Bvent says. Put a screw back in it. A couple of the manufacturers said use a little high-temp RTV on it. Either way, just be smart about it, okay? All right, well, if no one else has anything on that, then we'll continue on. Number 10, I think that's just kind of a gimme. That's code, and that's what we do. I don't know that we need to necessarily restate it over and over again. Thoughts on that? And if you're following code, then that should be a gimme. Number 11, pleated filters are mandatory. We all know that there are furnaces out there that have problems with pleated filters. So I don't know that we need to say pleated filters are mandatory. Our field guide on page 235 just says install a MERV 6 or higher filter in the new furnace. And, you know, you're always checking temperature rise. If you run into a problem where the filter is causing temperature rise problems, I don't have a problem with you putting in a different filter to correct that. We know it happens. I've seen it happen. So that language can probably be changed to, you know, pleated filters are recommended whenever possible. Any comments on that? So probably just look at changing the language of that, I guess. 13, condensate drains. This is all covered in the code in the IMC and the IFGC. I don't know. What do you guys' thought on this? Change the language, elaborate, point to the code, add, subtract, get rid of it?
I think if we're gonna keep this document, then some of these things, even if they're best practices or kind of obvious, it doesn't hurt to leave them in there. So
Okay.
if this one just needs a little clarification, or if it would be better to point to the code in a general sense, and that way if the code changes, then the rule changes. You know, something
Okay.
like that might help. I don't know. That was my thought.
I think that's good. I'll just kind of change the language, point to the code, point to the field guide type of thing. That way, again, those who want to use this to give to a contractor certainly can still do that. 14, this one has come up lately. So condensate drains on mobile homes. And then the last part that says if you can't find a dry or a vent to run it into or a drain to run it into a large diameter insulated PVC pipe installed at a steep incline to facilitate draining and help prevent freezing. Dumping condensate water underneath the mobile home is not permitted. This was one that Mike and Gary said, you shall put that in the best practices. They didn't want condensate dumped under a mobile home. This has come up recently. What are your guys' thoughts? Chime in on this. What do you want this to say?
Just take it out completely.
Yeah, there's a lot worse things dumping down there.
I agree. Okay, so if we just, oops, get rid of that and get rid of that and just kind of lump all condensate drains into one thing and reference the code and the field guide. Everyone good with that? I'm hearing silence. I'm assuming that means yes.
Yes.
All right. Moving along so we can get out of here. Ducting, this stuff's all pretty straightforward. So 1 through 5, does anyone have, I want to talk about 6 separately because it came up. So anyone have any issues on 1 through 5 or any comments they want to make, and then we'll talk about 6. And again, this is all really covered in our field guide. I think probably what I'll do on this section is just point to our field guide. Since I'm not hearing anything on 1 through 5, let's talk about 6 and why 6 is even in there. Kind of a funny story. So silicone caulk or high temperature caulk is not allowed for duct sealing. Mastic must be used. I disagree with this, and I always have. The reason that got put in there is because early on, me and Gary Spangenberg were out doing some monitoring, and we came across a job where someone had used red RTV silicone to seal the ductwork. But it looked like what they did was they stood back about 3 feet from the ductwork and filled the palm of their hand full of the silicone and then flung it at the ductwork. There was red RTV all over the place, down the front of the furnace, down the side of the furnace, all over the ductwork, all over the floor. And Gary said, "No one shall ever use silicone again in this program. That looks like crap." And that's why that's in there. I don't have a problem with you using silicone. I use it all the time, especially when you're connecting a coil to a furnace. Silicone at that joint is great. Connecting a plenum to a furnace or a plenum to a coil, silicone at that joint is awesome. Connecting a filter box to a furnace, silicone is a great choice there. So I don't have a problem with that. I think we should just delete it, but I want your guys' input.
I think we just delete it. I used polyurethane up on a university at a commercial job that I did when I was younger.
Yeah,
That's what they had all used. They'd all use poly.
yeah. And again, the reason that got in there was because of that one job that we saw, and Gary, I remember Gary got so mad and decided that no one in the program will ever use silicone again. So.
Hey, Wade, I actually want to talk about 1 through 5 for a second, if you...
Okay, yep.
So just reading, like number 1 says, all accessible cold air returns will be sealed, period. What does that mean?
So this was a Mike Johnson thing. He wanted every return air that you could get into. So any return air duct, any return air panning, any return air grill, anything you could get into to seal the return air.
So this is on, there's an existing home. We are not building any ductwork. This is just existing ductwork, and this document says we want to seal everything we can reach.
And again, this was a Mike Johnson thing that was put in there. I think this language could be changed to, because we seal return duct as a health and safety item if it's causing backdrafting, right?
If you you can address it if it's causing backdrafting on the CAS, yeah, or
Yeah.
negative pressure on the CAS or anything.
So I think maybe this language needs to be changed to, we seal return ductwork as a health and safety measure because it's causing problems in the CAS. And then, of course, any ductwork out of the envelope, we do whatever we can to seal it, right? So I think that statement that all accessible cold air returns will be sealed, period, is maybe a little too prescriptive.
I think so too, because especially if you've tested it and it's tight. If you've tested it, you've got a good blower door number, why touch it?
Yeah, I agree. If the return in the CAS is not causing a problem, I don't know that you necessarily need to seal it. If it is causing a problem, then take care of it. Again, anything out of the envelope, absolutely seal as much as you can. So.
Yeah, number 2, I'm definitely on board with.
Let's get rid of that, and I'll look at reformulating some language on this or pointing to the field guide. Number 2, absolutely.
And then I'm not sure where I stand on number 3. I guess it's really, it kind of goes back to number 2 a little bit. If it's outside of the conditioned space, then seal it up. But I kind of what Lauren just said, like there's a point of diminishing returns on some of this stuff. We don't want to tear apart a mobile home belly to, we don't want to rip the golden goose open just to find out there's guts inside.
Yeah, but they don't have returns in them.
Wade, I have a question on number 3. It says it's imperative that the registers fit properly in the ducts on mobile homes.
Yeah, again, that was another Mike Johnson thing. He wanted you guys replacing registers in mobile homes if they were beat up and in bad shape.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think that we need to be that prescriptive. I think maybe that's an agency choice.
I think the main idea behind that is because they get restrictive, because when they get stepped on, they get bent out, and then they get, if you've seen some of those, but they're such a small amount of space in between them, and then after they get walked on for 10 years, they get flattened out.
Yeah, and I agree.
You can travel through them.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a choice that could be made at the agency level in the field, Okay, like Lauren said, yeah, they're so badly damaged and smashed up that there's no air coming through them. Let's replace them. Maybe they got a little bit of damage, but they still get plenty of air. Why are we replacing them? Again, I think that's a decision you guys can make. I don't think we need to be that prescriptive about it.
Cool.
Anything else on ducting section? Again, I'll go back and just look at changing language and pointing to our field guide. All right, moving along then so we can get done with this. AC systems. Number 1, that's an EPA requirement. So, that is what it is. Your contractors and you should be keeping refrigerant logs if you're moving or transporting refrigerant. I think the language in number 2 there could probably be wrote better. And again, I think our AC policy covers that also. Weigh in on that, guys. I'm kind of the opinion that that can all go away. It's covered in our guidelines, kind of covered in the field guide. Anyone who's EPA certified, and you have to be to work with refrigerant, knows number one. So
is that correct that when you're installing a new furnace, is it always going to require a new evaporative coil?
no, it's not always going to require a new one. That's, again, a call the agency can make. In a lot of instances, yes, it will, but not always. So.
Okay.
And that's where I kind of got hung up on this, because the language says 90-plus furnace will require the installation of a new evaporator coil. Well, that's not always true. It's true in a lot of cases, but not always. So. And again, I'm pretty sure our guidelines cover that pretty well in the AC section. But
Yeah.
okay. And finally, water heater stuff. I don't know. I thought we don't do water heaters anymore.
You don't. Let's get rid of it all.
Unfortunately, like Tony says, sometimes when we touch them, we own them, and we have to replace them, right? Every once in a while, under certain circumstances, we do have to swap out a water heater.
Yeah.
It's probably not bad info for especially if this is a reference for contractors.
Yeah.
Or just a quick reference for us.
No. Anyone else have anything on it? My knee-jerk reaction was to get rid of it because we don't do water heaters anymore, but you know what Turner just said is valid. Occasionally we do, and so I guess if we do it, we need to have a minimum set of standards we should be held to or hold our contractors to. So
Number 3 is still a big thing we do.
okay, yeah, insulating.
Is this an appropriate place for this? Like, if you guys are going to use this as a document to hand your contractors, is this a good place to leave this information? Or should this be taken off of this document and just have them reference the field guide when you're doing?
That's a good place.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I will work on this document and try to update it and make it read better, and I'll send it out to everyone for review. And again, you know, someone had mentioned they would like to keep it so they can give it to their contractors. So I will adjust it with that in mind, that it's a document that you give to your contractors that just lets them know, hey, here's our you know, minimum standards. I'll reference our guidelines and field guide everywhere I can. I'll reference the PVC thing.
I just want to ask, is the number 3 on the water heater, is that everything on there still valid?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. You should always try to insulate a water heater. There's always heat transfer taking place there, and insulate it with whatever you can get on it. I understand, and I totally get it. You can't always get an R11 or R13 blanket on. Sometimes all you can get on is an R5. Well,
All right.
Because of the temperature difference there, anything you can do helps. So that's where I'm at with it.
Some of that is covered in the water heater safety checklist also.
Okay, guys, like I said, I'll work on this document and try to get it out sometime soon. I don't know, I've got OSHA and I've got to go to Washington, D.C. and a few other things, but I'll work on this and get it out to you for review. Again, your input is what I'm looking for. You know, we all got to work together to make this work, and you guys are the ones out in the trenches doing it, so kind of give us some input on what makes your life easier. Really, at the end of the day, we're trying to make your life easier. I know sometimes it doesn't seem like we are, but really we are. We're cognizant of how hard your jobs are, and we do appreciate everything you guys do. If anyone doesn't have anything else, we'll call it done.
Thanks, Wade, and thank you guys for your feedback. Everybody have a good day.
See you guys later.
Thank you. You too.